Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Bette Davis was one of the most iconic and formidable actresses in the history of American cinema. Renowned for her intense performances, sharp wit, and fiercely independent spirit, she carved a unique path through Hollywood's golden age, often playing complex, unglamorous, and morally ambiguous women at a time when such roles were rare for actresses. Early life. Ruth Elizabeth Davis was born on April 5, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts. After her parents divorced when she was a child, she moved with her mother and sister to New York. Fascinated by theater, Davis enrolled at the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts, where she trained alongside future stars like Lucille Ball. Rise to stardom. Bette Davis made her film debut in 1931 and initially struggled to make an impression in Hollywood due to her unconventional looks and mannerisms. Her breakthrough came with Of Human Bondage, 1934, in which she played a cruel and manipulative waitress. Though she was controversially snubbed for an Oscar nomination, her performance established her as a serious actress. She soon won 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress, for Dangerous, 1935, and Jezebel, 1938, and received a total of 10 nominations throughout her career, a record for her time. Career highlights. Davis was known for taking on roles other actresses avoided. She excelled in films such as Dark Victory, 1939, The Letter, 1940, Now, Voyager, 1942, Mr. Skeffington, 1944, All About Eve, 1950, where her portrayal of aging stage diva Margot Channing remains one of the most celebrated performances in film history. She was admired for her fearless approach to acting, often embracing characters who were vain, bitter, or desperate, yet always compelling. Personal life and legacy. Davis was known off-screen for her determination and fiery temperament. She fought openly with studio executives, especially during her early years with Warner Brothers, advocating for better roles and artistic freedom. She was also the first female president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, though her tenure was brief and controversial. Her personal life was stormy, marked by 4 marriages and a famously troubled relationship with her daughter, Bette Hyman, who later wrote a scathing memoir. In her later years, Davis continued to act in both films and television, including in horror classics like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962, opposite Joan Crawford. Their bitter real-life rivalry became legendary. Death and recognition. Bette Davis passed away on October 6, 1989, at age 81. She left behind a remarkable legacy, over 100 films, numerous accolades, and a reputation as one of the greatest actresses of all time. Her fierce independence, bold role choices, and uncompromising spirit helped redefine the image of women in film. Her tombstone reads, fittingly, "She did it the hard way." A trailblazer in Hollywood. Bette Davis was not just a star, she was a revolutionary force in a male-dominated industry. In the 1930s, when most actresses were cast as decorative love interests, Davis insisted on roles with substance, depth, and conflict. She defied the studio system, notably suing Warner Brothers in 1936 when they placed her in mediocre films. Although she lost the case, it was a landmark moment in Hollywood history, helping to pave the way for greater creative control for actors. Style and screen presence. What set Davis apart was her piercing eyes, clipped diction, and commanding presence. She wasn't traditionally beautiful by Hollywood standards, but she had charisma, intensity, and intelligence. She could dominate a scene with a glance or a line, and she had no fear of appearing unattractive if it served the character. whether she was playing a manipulative socialite, a spinster, or a fading star. Davis brought a level of psychological realism that was ahead of its time. All About Eve, and later her performance in All About Eve, 1950, marked a career resurgence. Playing Margot Channing, an aging actress faced with a cunning young rival, Davis delivered some of the most biting and iconic lines in film history. The role mirrored her own career at the time, adding a layer of meta-commentary that critics and audiences admired. The film was nominated for 14 Oscars, and Davis herself received her 9th Best Actress nomination. In the 1960s, she found success again with Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, in which she played Baby Jane Hudson, a grotesque former child star consumed by jealousy and madness. The film's success renewed interest in Davis and led to a wave of psychological thrillers starring aging actresses, a subgenre now often referred to as psycho-biddy. Honors and Accolades: Academy Awards. 2 wins, 10 nominations. Emmy Award, 1 for Strangers. The Story of a Mother and Daughter, 1979. Cannes Film Festival Best Actress for All About Eve. AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, 1977. She was the first woman to receive it. Kennedy Center Honors, 1987. Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her star is located at 6225 Hollywood Boulevard. She was also named the second greatest female screen legend of all time by the American Film Institute in 1999, second only to Katharine Hepburn. Personal fortitude: Bette Davis survived personal and professional challenges with steely resolve. She battled cancer, had a mastectomy, and suffered a stroke in the 1980s, yet continued to work. Her 1987 memoir, This and That, candidly addressed her health struggles and the betrayal she felt over her daughter's tell-all book. Still, she remained unapologetically herself to the end, sharp, witty, and proud. Influence and cultural legacy: Davis's influence endures through film, music, and pop culture. The line, "Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night," is still quoted today. Kim Carnes' 1981 hit, Bette Davis Eyes, immortalized her in song, and the term, Bette Davis Eyes, became synonymous with her enigmatic, intense gaze. Many modern actresses, including Susan Sarandon, Meryl Streep, and Jessica Lange, have cited Davis as a major influence. Her fearlessness and refusal to be boxed in have inspired generations of women in the arts. Bette Davis was more than a screen legend. She was a symbol of fierce independence, artistic integrity, and resilience. Her legacy is not just in the roles she played but in the barriers she shattered. Relationships, feuds, and the cult of personality: Bette Davis's off-screen life was as dramatic as her performances. Fiercely private but often embroiled in public scandals. She became famous for her biting honesty and legendary feuds, most famously with actress Joan Crawford. Their animosity exploded during and after the making of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, with both actresses trading insults through the press for years. Davis once quipped, "I wouldn't piss on her if she were on fire." Their feud later inspired the hit FX series Feud. Bette and Joan, 2017, introducing their complex relationship to a new generation. Despite the public fireworks, Davis also had strong friendships with other artists and deep loyalty to the few she trusted. But she often alienated people with her stubbornness and intolerance for what she saw as mediocrity or hypocrisy. Marriages and family: Davis was married 4 times, none of which ended happily. Her longest and most complicated relationship was perhaps with her daughter, Barbara B.D. Hyman, whom she adopted with her 3rd husband, artist William Grant Sherry. In 1985, B.D. published the memoir My Mother's Keeper, a highly critical portrait of Davis that was released shortly after Davis had suffered a stroke and undergone a mastectomy. The betrayal devastated her and strained their relationship permanently. Davis had admitted to being a demanding parent but dismissed the book as revengeful and exaggerated. It cast a shadow over her final years, yet she remained defiant and unapologetic. Later life and final years. Even in her later years, Davis refused to retire. She appeared in TV, movies, and interviews, speaking with unfiltered candor about the industry, her career, and aging. She published 2 autobiographies, The Lonely Life, 1962, This and That, 1987, in 1983. She won an Emmy for her performance in Strangers, the story of a mother and daughter, which ironically mirrored her own troubled maternal relationship. In 1987, she received the Kennedy Center Honors, a moment of recognition from an industry that she had both served and challenged. Davis spent her final years in France. On October 6, 1989, she died in Neuilly-sur-Seine from breast cancer and complications from a stroke. Her epitaph, "She did it the hard way," was chosen by her and remains one of the most iconic statements of any Hollywood figure. Impact on women in film. Bette Davis shattered the mold of what a leading lady could be. She portrayed women with flaws, ambition, anger, vulnerability, and sharp intelligence, long before it became common or acceptable. In an industry that often reduced women to passive beauty or supportive roles, Davis carved out a legacy that elevated women's voices and complexities on screen. Her legacy is particularly strong among feminist film critics and actors who value the kind of raw, risk-taking performances she delivered. Films like Now, Voyager, where she played a repressed woman who transforms through self-discovery and defies social expectations, remain symbols of emotional emancipation and inner strength. Icon status today, Bette Davis is not just remembered, she's revered. Her distinct voice, unflinching gaze, and fierce independence are etched into Hollywood mythology. Her name evokes a kind of excellence, fearlessness, and intensity that remains unmatched. She is regularly cited in film schools, retrospectives, and feminist film criticism as a pioneer, a fighter, and a true artist. In a town full of glamour, Davis brought gravity. In an era of passivity, she demanded power. She didn't just act, she owned the screen. Bette Davis wasn't just a star, she was a storm, and Hollywood has never seen another quite like her. The craft of acting. Bette Davis's technique and approach. Bette Davis approached acting as a serious intellectual craft. She studied her characters intensely and refused to coast on charm or looks. She was known for rehearsing obsessively, working closely with costume designers and makeup artists to mold her character's physical appearance to match their psychological depth. Davis was one of the first actresses to understand the power of subtlety on camera, especially using her eyes. Her famously expressive gaze, often glowering or filled with tension, conveyed what many actors needed pages of dialogue to express. She was a master at letting inner conflict simmer beneath the surface. Even in silence, she could dominate a scene. She once said, "Acting should be bigger than life. Scripts should be bigger than life. It should all be bigger than life." Yet paradoxically, her performances often felt more real than those of her contemporaries. She dared to show aging, jealousy, weakness, and regret, long before such traits were considered worthy of a female star. Signature roles and lines. Bette Davis's filmography is filled with moments that have become part of cinematic history. A few examples of her most enduring roles in quotes: Now, Voyager, 1942, Oh, Jerry, Don't Let's Ask for the Moon. We Have the Stars. A deeply romantic moment, perfectly capturing her character's bittersweet victory over repression. All About Eve, 1950. Fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night. Perhaps the most quoted line of her career, delivered with world-weary sharpness and self-awareness. Jezebel, 1938. Her performance as the defiant Southern belle won her an Oscar and was seen as a direct response to losing the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. The Little Foxes, 1941. She portrayed Regina Giddens, one of cinema's coldest and most calculating female characters. In one chilling scene, she silently watches her husband die, without lifting a finger. Reputation and industry fear Bette Davis's strong will earned her as many enemies as admirers. She was famously outspoken, never afraid to criticize producers, co-stars, or scripts she considered beneath her. She clashed with studio heads like Jack Warner and insisted on choosing her own directors. She once described Hollywood as a place that is too pleased with itself, and called actors who pandered to popularity cowards. Many directors found her difficult, but also exhilarating to work with, because she was committed to the truth of a performance. She would rather be disliked for playing a real woman than loved for playing a fantasy. She once told an interviewer, "I was the Marlon Brando of my generation." Posthumous recognition. Since her death in 1989, Bette Davis's legend has only grown. Her films are regularly featured in retrospectives, and several biographies and documentaries have been produced, including Bette Davis, The Benevolent Volcano, All About Bette Feud. Betty and Joan, TV miniseries, 2017. She is often referenced in academic discussions of gender, performance, and film history. In modern pop culture, she is an enduring symbol of tough, unapologetic femininity. A woman ahead of her time, Bette Davis fought for what she believed in, roles that challenged her, independence from the studio system, and respect for acting as a serious profession. At a time when actresses were expected to smile and comply, she roared and rebelled. She once declared, "Hollywood always wanted me to be pretty, but I fought for realism." In the end, Bette Davis didn't just act in great movies, she shaped what great acting means. She paved the way for generations of women to take control of their careers, demand better roles, and be seen not just as stars but as artists. Early career struggles and determination. Bette Davis's arrival in Hollywood was far from glamorous. When she arrived at Universal Pictures in 1930, the studio didn't even send someone to meet her at the train station, a slight she never forgot. Her first screen tests were deemed unimpressive, and executives questioned her marketability. A cameraman reportedly remarked, "She has as much sex appeal as Slim Somerville, a character actor known for his homely appearance." But Davis was determined. She refused to be discouraged and kept working, often in low-budget pictures. Her big break came with The Man Who Played God, 1932, opposite George Arliss, who championed her talent. It was Arliss who convinced Warner Brothers to sign her to a long-term contract, launching one of the most storied partnerships in film history. Her early success was solidified with Of Human Bondage, 1934, a role that many stars had turned down because the character was cruel and physically unappealing. Davis not only accepted it, she demanded realism, smearing her makeup and making her character as raw and unpleasant as the role demanded. Though she was overlooked by the Academy that year, public outcry was so strong that the Academy changed its nomination rules the following year. Pioneering legal battle, the Warner Brothers lawsuit in 1936. At the height of her frustration with Warner Brothers for placing her in mediocre films, Davis took the studio to court in Britain, where she had agreed to make 2 films. She hoped to break her restrictive contract, which gave the studio control over her roles and public image. Though she lost the case, and ended up heavily in debt because of it, it marked a historic stand. Davis was one of the first major stars to challenge the iron grip of the studio system. It was a bold move for a woman in the 1930s and earned her the admiration of fellow artists who longed for similar creative freedom. After the lawsuit, Warner Brothers gave her better scripts, leading to a golden run in the late 1930s and early 40s with films like Jezebel, Dark Victory, The Letter, and The Little Foxes. The Warner Brothers queen by the early 1940s. Bette Davis was the undisputed queen of Warner Brothers. She received top billing, had script approval, and attracted the best writers and directors. She became known for championing young talent and frequently mentored newcomers on set. She also led efforts to support the war effort. In 1942, she co-founded the Hollywood Canteen, a club where GIs could dance, eat, and meet movie stars before shipping off to World War II. Davis worked there regularly and became its most tireless promoter, later receiving the Congressional Gold Medal for her efforts. Decline and comeback. Like many actresses, Davis's popularity waned in the late 1940s as younger stars emerged. Her contract with Warner Brothers ended in 1949. Then, with her future uncertain, came the career-defining role in All About Eve, 1950. The film's success was a triumphant return, and her performance as Margot Channing became one of the most iconic in screen history. Later, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, 1962, reinvented her again, this time as a horror icon. While the genre shift was unexpected, Davis threw herself into it with the same fearless commitment she had in her youth. She would continue acting into the 1980s, even after a stroke and a battle with cancer. Her final role was in the television film Wicked Stepmother, 1989, although her health forced her to withdraw before filming was complete. Bette Davis, in her own words, Davis was famous for her quotable, uncompromising wit. Some of her most iconic quotes include, "I'd rather be Bette Davis than Marilyn Monroe. If you have never been hated by your child, you have never been a parent. Old age ain't no place for sissies. Acting is not being emotional, but being able to express emotion." These statements reveal her unyielding personality, shaped by decades of fighting for her dignity, artistic freedom, and place in an industry that often tried to diminish her enduring legacy. More than 30 years after her death, Bette Davis remains a towering figure in cinematic history. Retrospectives of her work continue to draw new viewers, especially among younger women and aspiring actors who see her as a symbol of courage and artistry. Film scholars praise her for turning the Hollywood heroine from a decorative object into a complex, intelligent protagonist. She has become a pop culture touchstone, appearing in everything from drag performances to scholarly essays on gender and power. Her image, arched eyebrow, cigarette in hand, voice like a dagger, still looms large over any serious discussion of what it means to be a truly great actor. In the end, Bette Davis wasn't simply a star. She was, and remains, a force of nature. Bette Davis and the evolution of the female archetype. Before Bette Davis, most female roles in Hollywood were bound by limiting stereotypes: the ingenue, the seductress, the dutiful wife. Davis shattered these molds, portraying women who were ambitious, flawed, intelligent, vindictive, vulnerable, or all of the above. She refused to glamorize her characters if it meant sacrificing emotional truth. She was bold enough to portray anti-heroines, women who didn't apologize for their power or desires. In doing so, she expanded the range of what women could be on screen, opening doors for actresses like Anne Bancroft, Faye Dunaway, Glenn Close, and Viola Davis. Bette made audiences, and Hollywood itself, recognize that a woman's story didn't have to be palatable to be powerful. Her style and signature persona Davis wasn't a fashion icon in the traditional sense. She rejected Hollywood's obsession with youth and beauty and often fought with studio makeup departments to allow more naturalistic or even grotesque looks for her characters. Her expressive bulging eyes, clipped voice, and deliberate gestures became her trademarks. What might have been considered unladylike became her artistic weapon. She developed a screen persona that was imperious and biting, often using sarcasm, confrontation, or emotional stillness to overpower her co-stars. Even when playing women on the brink of madness, as in The Star, 1952, or Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, 1964, Davis brought a fierce dignity that made her performances unforgettable. Davis vs. Crawford. The real story. The rivalry between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford has been mythologized, but it had roots in genuine competition. Crawford was known for being glamorous, calculating, and conscious of her image, while Davis prided herself on being a raw, unvarnished actress. Their personalities clashed bitterly during the production of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, with both women trying to outdo and undermine each other on set. After the film's success, Davis received an Oscar nomination, while Crawford did not, a slight Crawford never forgave. Crawford even campaigned against Davis during the awards season and famously accepted the Oscar on behalf of Anne Bancroft, who had beaten Davis. While the feud was certainly real, Davis later admitted, "She was a professional. And I never said she wasn't. But she was also the kind of woman who would sell her own mother to get ahead." The drama between them, however sensational, also spoke to the limited space Hollywood allowed for aging women, forcing them into cutthroat competition for the few quality roles available. Influence on modern culture. Bette Davis's legend has permeated film, television, music, and fashion. Kim Carnes's song, Bette Davis Eyes, 1981, topped the charts and won 2 Grammy Awards. Davis wrote to Carnes to thank her, saying the song made her feel like $1 million. Drag culture reveres Davis for her dramatic flair and camp appeal. Her voice and gestures are often mimicked in drag performances and queer iconography. The FX series Feud, 2017, starring Susan Sarandon as Davis and Jessica Lange as Crawford, brought renewed attention to her story and re-examined her legacy through a modern lens of feminism and ageism. Hollywood biographers and scholars continue to write about Davis's films, her trailblazing role in studio politics, and her influence on the aesthetics of acting. A working actress to the end, even in declining health, Davis never lost her drive. After suffering a stroke and undergoing a mastectomy in the early 1980s, she resumed acting almost immediately. She made appearances on The Tonight Show, starred in made-for-TV films, and gave speeches around the world. In interviews, she was brutally honest about her loneliness, her regrets, and the price she paid for her independence, but she never expressed shame or doubt about her choices. She received a standing ovation at the 1987 Cannes Film Festival, where she was awarded the Legion of Honor, France's highest cultural recognition. Final thoughts. The Davis philosophy. Bette Davis's legacy is more than just cinematic, it's philosophical. She believed in fighting for one's self-worth, in resisting conformity, and in pursuing excellence at any cost. Her work ethic was relentless, her standards high, and her opinions fierce. She endured mockery, lawsuits, illness, heartbreak, and betrayal, but remained, through it all, defiant, dedicated, and unforgettable. She once said, "To fulfill a dream, to be allowed to sweat over lonely labor, to be given a chance to create, is the meat and potatoes of life. The money is the gravy." In every sense, Bette Davis earned her place in history, not by charm or compliance, but by unmatched talent, willpower, and the courage to walk alone. To this day, she remains not just a star, but a symbol of uncompromising female strength. Bette Davis and the studio era. Mastering the system she fought. Although Bette Davis is celebrated for her independence and rebellion against the studio system, she was also a master of working within it when necessary. At Warner Brothers, she became the studio's most valuable female star throughout the late 1930s and early 1940s. She made a film almost every year, sometimes more than one, proving her incredible work ethic and box office power. During this time, Davis starred in a series of now classic films that not only showed her range but also reflected the concerns of the time: illness, dark victory, class and ambition, The Old Maid, The Great Lie, Wartime Sacrifice, Now, Voyager, and social corruption, The Little Foxes. Her films became a kind of emotional barometer for the American public, especially women, many of whom saw themselves in her struggles. While Davis battled studio control, she was also savvy. She cultivated strong working relationships with top directors like William Wyler, Edmund Goulding, and Irving Rapper, and often demanded rewrites or casting changes to elevate her material. She was particularly influential in adapting novels and plays into starring vehicles for herself, choosing challenging material that would scare off most actresses of her time. Rivalries, respect, and professional standards. Though Bette Davis's feud with Joan Crawford is the most well-known, it wasn't her only rivalry. She had complex relationships with many of her co-stars, particularly actresses. Davis believed in professional discipline and had little patience for vanity, unpreparedness, or coasting on looks. She famously clashed with Miriam Hopkins, with whom she made several films, most notably Old Acquaintance, 1943. On set, Davis grew so frustrated with Hopkins's antics that she physically shook her in one scene, an action the director allowed to stay in the final cut. But Davis also respected excellence. She maintained a lifelong admiration for Katharine Hepburn, whose fearless choices and independence mirrored her own. With male co-stars, Davis worked well, particularly with Humphrey Bogart, Paul Henreid, George Brent, and Charles Boyer, although she had little tolerance for ego. Her roles and women's inner lives. Many of Davis's most memorable performances explored themes of female repression, transformation, and rebellion. In Now, Voyager, 1942, she played Charlotte Vale, a timid spinster who undergoes a psychological awakening. The film touched on mental health, self-worth, and motherhood in ways rarely seen in mainstream cinema at the time. In Mr. Skeffington, 1944, Davis played a vain woman forced to confront the emptiness of her youth-obsessed identity, an unusually vulnerable role. In The Letter, 1940, and The Little Foxes, 1941, she explored moral ambiguity, playing women who were calculating and emotionally ruthless, yet still compelling. She embraced the chance to make audiences uncomfortable, pushing them to question their assumptions about femininity, aging, power, and morality. Unlike the polished fantasy roles assigned to many of her contemporaries, Davis gave women real psychological weight and space to be flawed but fascinating. Honors, recognition, and a life of firsts in addition to her Oscar wins and record-breaking nominations. Bette Davis achieved many firsts: first female president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, though her tenure was short due to disagreements with the board. First woman to receive the AFI Life Achievement Award in.
Thanks for watching. Bye bye. Bye.